These are the days we call Chol HaMoed, the days between the first day of Pesach, which is a holiday, and the final day of Pesach, which is a holiday. Over the next 4 days, I'm going to send you 4 virtual journeys, short virtual journeys taken on the Kibbutz, so you can enjoy them before the next Chag, the next holiday. Chag Sameach, Moadim L'Simcha. Bye. So folks, we are what is known as an intentional community, a community of people that got together with a shared ideology. We're now standing actually right in the heart of the kibbutz, or the heart of, put it this way, of the traditional kibbutz. More about that later when I talk about how the kibbutz has changed. We're going to go inside the dining room, the Chadar Ochel, which in many ways function as the heart of the old kibbutz, and I'll talk a little bit about the basis of kibbutz ideology. Come with me as we go into the dining room. It's going to be a little bit different from normal, once again because of we're living in the days of Corona, but it's a great place to sit and talk for a moment. It's deathly quiet in here. It's really bizarre because normally there'd be much more noise than you're hearing at the moment. So folks, this is what a kibbutz dining room looks like in the days of Corona. A little sad, I agree. Back to the ideology of kibbutz. So there are 2 basic ideological principles behind this community. Listen carefully and see if you can pick up the inherent contradiction, the tension between the 2 basic ideological tenets. On the one hand, from each according to his or her ability, to each according to his or her need. One very basic and crucial ideological tenet to who we are. And the second one is a very strong statement about equality. So of course you can hear straight away, if on the one hand we say that we recognize individual difference from each according to his or her ability to each according to his or her need, recognizes individual difference, but on the other hand we strongly stand for equality. One of the realities of our community from the inception of the kibbutz to 1908, 1909 is when the kibbutz movement starts. From that point onwards until today, we have been struggling with how do we find a way to live with both of these ideological tenets. And they are very, very important to us, both of them. Do want to create a community which has both equality of opportunity and material equality. We want that. At the same time, we recognize that each and every one of us is different. And that has been the tension. In the early days of kibbutz, we shared everything. Personal property was something almost non-existent. One of my great stories of the first time I came to kibbutz when I was 18 years old, a young, very passionate Zionist from South Africa, was that we shared all of our clothes. Sharing your clothes is one of the ultimate forms of sharing. Look around the table, or well, you're not sitting at a table, but just think if you were sitting at a table in your synagogue and having this conversation. And think about what it would mean if the clothes you're wearing now could actually be shared by the person on your left and the person on your right. Sharing everything we had, from the means of production, from the tractors like the old tractor you saw outside, to the clothes you actually wore, was hugely significant. From the beginning, from the early days of kibbutz, we recognized that this tension could only be solved by looking at things very, very carefully. And the way we did it was as follows. We used to have, still today to some extent we do have, weekly kibbutz meetings to try and work out how we live with these two principles which in some way contradict each other. So that is the basis of kibbutz ideology. In addition to this, do not forget that the kibbutz plays a huge role in the building up of the State of Israel. There was once a statement which said, if you turn off all the lights in the country and leave only the lights on the kibbutzim on, kibbutzim plural of kibbutz, you can actually get a map of the State of Israel. And in many ways, When you look at where we are situated, often you'll find kibbutzim situated in places which might not seem unusual today because the economic activity of the state has grown so much. But in the early days of the State of Israel and pre-state, in the days before the State of Israel, it made no sense economically to create a community on the edges of the country, a community in the areas of the desert, communities up on a hilltop and not down in the fertile land below. Kibbutzim were created both as a response to a personal dream of individuals who dreamed about creating societies based on equality, based on justice, based on a notion that they were going to be the vanguard in the creation of a new world based on very different principles from the world that they'd come from. And in addition to kibbutz being created to fulfill, to give an answer to personal needs and personal dreams, the kibbutz from its outset understood that it had a role to play in the creation of a Jewish state, in a role to play in helping the Jewish people build something that we hadn't had for a long, long time, a national home. What I'm going to do now is walk you around the kibbutz for a little bit more to show you how some of these ideological principles were acted out in reality. Let's head off to where the education on the kibbutz happens. Let's go. In the 1930s, Janusz Korczak, the man who was later to unfortunately take all of the Jewish orphans from Warsaw together with him to Treblinka to their death, forced to by the Nazis during the Second World War, came to Palestine, pre-Israel Palestine, to learn about education in Palestine. And of course he chose to visit kibbutz, because it was on the kibbutzim where the really exciting educational work was happening. And that's what we're going to talk about in this next little piece about the kibbutz. I want to point out, by the way, to my left is a memorial to the first of the preschool teachers on the kibbutz, who I was lucky enough to know in her old age, and know today her children, her grandchildren, and her great-grandchildren that live on this kibbutz. More about the multi-generational kibbutz in a moment, but let's just take a walk into the area of the preschool on the kibbutz. Now, one of the amazing things about the kibbutz is the educational system. The educational system on the kibbutz is based on the notion that you have to build solidarity from day one. From very, very young age, in the early days, from literally within weeks of birth, the young children the infants would actually go into the system, and they were raised in what we called communal educational frameworks. In those days, communal educational frameworks included sleeping communally, and you had the reality of babies from 6 weeks old spending the vast majority of their time within the group framework. Even today, the group is really emphasized, so much so that young people understand on the kibbutz that their primary responsibility is not only to themselves but to the group that they are a part of. That's how we build solidarity from the bottom up. So in the early days of kibbutz, the children slept communally. Every afternoon from about 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon, when the parents got home from work, by the way, both parents used to always work, which meant that it was a great solution, not only ideologically in terms of building the notion of solidarity, but also allowing both parents to be at work. The late afternoon was quality time, was time in which parents spent with their children. Most of the rest of the time, the children were brought up communally, slept communally, and that was their major framework. Kibbutz Tzorah, my home kibbutz, the one we're on today, was the first kibbutz in 1961 to make what was then a revolutionary decision in the kibbutz movement for the children to come home, for the children to actually sleep at home, which then re-emphasized the family unit, the nuclear family unit, and to an extent de-emphasized the communal educational framework.